Alright, so in this tutorial we're going to look at CSS and how it applies to HTML. And we're going to use the typotips.zip file that you downloaded off of the Access site. When you unzip it, you'll get a folder that says it's called typotips-example. And inside you'll see two folders, images and styles, as well as an index.html. Now this is a standard typical file structure for a small site. The images folder is the folder where we would put all of our images. The styles folder is where we would put our style sheets, and if we open that up we can see that there is a style.css, and the index.html is our home page. All home pages are referred to by the name of index, and this one is an HTML file. So if I jump over to Atom, which is our browser of choice, we can see that I've got it set up already. I've got the styles open with our style.css. When I open it up, inside there is 4 lines of code already. There is this hashtag wrapper with the little curly braces, and everything in between belongs to the wrapper. Now the wrapper is an ID. We know that because of the pound sign. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, take a moment to look at the classes versus ID information that's been provided in this module. But if that does make sense to you, then you can keep going on with this. And we can see that the width of the wrapper is 600 px, or pixels, and it has a margin of 0 auto. Now we don't have to fully understand margins at this point. All we need to know is that when there's a margin of 0 auto, it centers everything on the x-axis for us. So now let's take a look at the index.html. We've got a pretty standard site. We've got the doc type, the HTML, the head, and then the body. And the first thing that comes after the body is a div with an ID of wrapper. Now we know that in the style sheet there's also a div or an ID called wrapper, and it happens to be applied to this div. Now this div, which is short for divider, encompasses all of our content, all of our headings and paragraphs. What the div is basically doing is grouping everything together for us so that everything will automatically be put into an invisible box of 600 pixels and centered nicely on the page. So let's just switch over to Chrome for a moment and look at it in the browser. So here's all of our content centered, 600 pixels wide, and no matter how big or how small we make this, it's always 600 pixels and always centered. So let's go back to our CSS file, our style.css, and let's add a little bit of code. Now, in the lecture we saw a little bit about this thing called a font family. So a font family is essentially setting rules for our font. So let's say that we wanted our H1 to have a font family with a serif. So Georgia, if I could type, is a great font for a serif font. Now, so is Times, as is Times New Roman, and they're all serifs. So let's take a moment and look at what I just wrote there. It said that the font family is Georgia, comma Times, comma, in quotes, Times New Roman, comma, serif, and I ended that statement with a semicolon. It's like putting a period at the end of your sentence. It tells the computer that this statement or this rule is done. Now a font family is more than just one font. What it does is create a set of defaults or fallbacks. So what this essentially tells the browser, so Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and so on, is that the first font that it should try is Georgia. Now, Georgia was one of those 9 fonts that we saw on our list of acceptable fonts, and it's one of the 9 because virtually every computer in the world has it. Now, if we searched, maybe the computer might find that the user deleted Georgia for some reason, and Georgia is not available. So the browser would go to the next one in line, which is Times, and it would search for it. And lo and behold, Times is not available on the computer either. Then it would try Times New Roman. Times New Roman is put into quotes because it's more than one word. If we didn't put the quotes there, the computer might get confused and search for Times again, then a font called Roman, then one called Roman. Or sorry, New, then Roman. So by putting the quotes, it looks for Times New Roman, and for some reason that font is not available either. So it goes and finds any old serif that it can find, and that's good enough. Now we want all of our headings to have that, so we're going to make it H1, H2, and H3. And we also want our paragraphs, paste that in first, all of our paragraphs to have it. Maybe if we have any unordered lists, keep making that same mistake there, not pasting it in first. So that's one way we could write that. The easier way to write this is to say that the body has the rule of font family. Because if we look at our HTML, we can see that all of our text is nested within the body tags. So everything in the body will get this rule applied to it. That's why a CSS file is called a cascading style sheet, because the rules trickle down in the order of importance in our content. So because everything is part of the body, the rules we apply for the body apply to everything. Now, we also talked about font pairing and said that a good rule of thumb is to pick one serif and one sans serif. So we've got our serifs here, and I personally like Georgia for paragraphs. I think it's a very nice font for reading. So maybe we will make our H1 have a font family of Helvetica to change it up. Arial is very similar. It's also a sans serif, and then we could just say that any old sans serif will do. So again, Helvetica will be the default font. If that doesn't exist on the computer for some reason, the browser will try Arial and then sans serif. So we could copy this out again for the H1s and the H2s and H3s and 4s and so on, or we could write comma H2, comma H3, comma H4, comma H5, and comma H6. So now all of our headings have the same rule, which makes life nice and easy and simple. Now we might want some rules specific just to the H1. So we could go and make an H1 rule that says that the font size of the H1, sorry, my mouse decided to hiccup there. Our font size is 36 pixels. And our H2 has a font size, and you can see that the computer is trying to help me out here and create the rules for me, of say 28 pixels. And the H3, we don't have more than 3 headings in this document, so we'll stop there, and we'll go with font size of 24 pixels. Now if I save that and go back to Chrome and hit refresh, you can see that our H1 here is the largest piece at 36, the H2 at 28, and the H3s at 24. And they're all in Helvetica, and all the paragraphs have stuck with that Georgia or serif rule. So we're not done just yet. There's a lot more we can do. We could add margins to all of these. So our H1, we could add a margin to the bottom of 12 pixels. And for our H3, let's go with a margin top of 36 pixels. Now maybe we also want a margin on the bottom of 36 pixels. So let's just save that, go back to Chrome for a second, and refresh. So now we've got nice margins above and below for all of our H3s. But there's actually a much easier way to write that. We could just write that the margin is 36 pixels by 0 by 36 pixels by 0. What that means is that the margin is 36 pixels at the top, 0 on the right, 36 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. If you think about it as a clock, the clock always starts at 12 and goes clockwise around. So 36 top, right, bottom, left. Now because we have pairs there, top and bottom are 36 and left and right are 36, we could also write that in pairs. All three options are right here. None of them are wrong. It's all a matter of what makes the most sense and what you feel most comfortable with as you write everything out. And if I hit save and just quickly go back and check and hit refresh, we can see that nothing has changed. So let's do a little bit of tweaking for our paragraph. I'll just bump this up a bit so we can see it. So our P is short for paragraph, and everything between those curly braces applies to the paragraph. So let's set a font size of 16 pixels, ended with the semicolon. We'll set a margin of 18 pixels 0, which is the same as margin 18 pixels 0, 18 pixels 0. And I'm just going to throw in a comment here saying this is the same as the line above. So just like we have comments in HTML, we also have comments in CSS. They use the slash and star, star slash. And I'm going to set the line height to 22 pixels, which is roughly 1.5 times. It's a little less. So again, I'll hit save and switch to Chrome and hit refresh. And hopefully you saw that there was a little jump there in between the lines. It gave a little more white space, a little more breathing room between the lines of text. Moving on, we could add some more things to the H1 to fine-tune our fonts a little more. We could set the text alignment to center, so that will center our H1. And maybe we'll add a text transform of capitalize. Now all of these CSS rules are in the textbook. Feel free to check them out. Let's hit save, switch back to Chrome, and looking at the H1 here, hit refresh, and it has capitalized the first letter in each word and centered the text for us. For our H2, Let's also set the text alignment to center. Let's make the font style italic and the font weight bold. Actually, sorry, it's bold by default, so let's make it normal. And if we hit save, switch over and hit refresh, you can see it's lighter, it's italicized, and it's centered. And for the H3, let's just switch back here again for a second. We can see that we've got some inconsistencies. Capital is actually lowercase. Figuring it out is lowercase for it and out. Joining forces has no capitals at all. So let's build the consistency in with our CSS by adding a text transform of capitalize. And when I hit refresh here, now our capital is capitalized. Figuring it out is all capitals, as is joining forces. So we didn't actually fix the HTML, we just did it through some CSS. With our paragraph, let's add a text indent of, say, 15 pixels. And I'll save that, switch back to Chrome so we can see what that looks like. So you can see the little indents have been added to our paragraphs there. Now that creates a bit of a problem. This little detail here has been indented. We don't really necessarily want that, so we can clean that up in a moment as well. Last but not least, we can add some color. So there are various ways to add color to things. We'll get to the specifics down the road when we deal with color in one of the future modules, but for now we'll just add some simple colors. So for the H1, let's add a color, and I've picked out a code already. Of FF496C. So that is a hexadecimal color, but I'll explain that down the road. For the H2, we could make that a color of EF98AA. And for the H3s, let's go with a color of FC2847. Now, one important thing to note, and this is something that people always make mistakes with, I still do it on the odd day, color is spelt with the American spelling. There is no U in the color. If you add a U, it will not work. So let's save that, switch back to Chrome and hit refresh, and now we've got some nice shades of red. Now all of those colors I actually pulled from a website that lists the hexadecimal codes or web colors for all of Crayola's crayons. It was an arbitrary decision. I just thought it would be an interesting little thing to pull from, so that's what I went with. Coming back here, let's take a quick look at our HTML file again. Now I said that that set of bullets looked odd. Now I've put a class in here called indent on that paragraph. Now I know it's the bulleted list because I have this code ampersand bull semicolon. That's short for bullet. Some characters like bullets or quotations or dashes confuse the computer. They're not sure whether it's code or text. So to make sure that they understand, we use these special escape characters. And if you look on the website for the textbook, there's a whole list of escape characters available for you. I've also, for these ones, shown you the shortcuts for Mac and Windows. Anyway, back to the class. So I've created a class on the paragraph of indent. If I come back to my CSS here, I'll just bump this up again so we can see a bit better. I can write dot indent because in CSS a class is referenced by a dot with my brackets, and the text indent that was applied, I can just say make it 0. And when I jump back and hit refresh, that text indent disappears. I might also want to change the link down here. It's that default blue with the underline. It doesn't look that great. Now, a link is an A tag, short for anchor. So I can set the rule there. Maybe I want a special color for it. And again, I've already gone and made the decision for the colors. So in this case, it's EE204D. And to get rid of that border, it's text decoration none. So again, I'll save my CSS, switch back over, and if we look down here, it's now a nice complementary red color, and the underline is gone. So that covers the bulk of the CSS that we can apply to our type. There are other things we could apply. There are special rules. Some code that is available that we may apply once in a lifetime, if ever. But the things that we need on a consistent, regular basis we have covered here. I would strongly advise that not only do you sit through the tutorial, but that you go ahead and give it a shot yourself. And once you're all finished, save your files so that when you're trying to figure out how to do something down the road, you can go back and review your CSS and see how it worked, see what you wrote, and pull from it as an example. Other than that, as always, if you're stuck on anything and have a question, please feel free to get in touch, and I will do my best to help you out. Otherwise, keep on working.